Juxtaposition is defined as the act or an instance of placing two or more things side by side, often to compare or contrast or to create an interesting effect. This convention is typically used to accentuate the value of the objects being compared by showing them in contrast to their polar opposite, thereby highlighting the aspects in one thing by showing the complete lack of those aspects in another. For example, this shot of Frankenstein's monster sitting beside a lake accentuates the natural beauty of the environment and the unnatural, grotesque nature of the monster by putting them both in the same frame. The lake is beautiful on its own, just as the monster is horrible on its own. But with the monster present, the lake is that much more beautiful, and beside the lake, the monster is that much more horrible, because we, as viewers, are simultaneously seeing each end of the spectrum. When Deadpool is cracking a joke, that joke is made all the more comedic because he's doing so while chopping someone's head off, while the decapitation is all the more brutal because we, the audience, are laughing as it is happening. The magnificence of a night sky, alight with fireflies, is all the more beautiful when shown in contrast to a depiction of a dying child. Grave of the Fireflies follows the story of 14-year-old Saita and his 4-year-old sister Sechiko as they struggle to survive the closing days of World War II. In the opening minutes of the film, we watch as the protagonist's hometown is bombed, leaving the town in ruins and the children's home destroyed. Furthermore, during the course of the bombing, the children's mother was gravely injured and before long succumbs to these injuries, essentially orphaning the brother and sister. In the aftermath of the bombing, the orphans come to reside with their aunt. At first, the woman is sympathetic and accommodating, but as resources in the country continue to wane, she becomes increasingly less and less so, eventually becoming so cold and standoffish that Saita decides that he and his sister would be better off living in what essentially amounts to a cave. As time passes, the material conditions of the children worsen and worsen. The rations being provided for them are insufficient. They have no income due to the fact that they are children, but they need to eat. At first, they catch and cook what they can find in the pond surrounding their cave, and later, they resort to thievery. But neither the scraps that they can scavenge or the ill-gotten gains are sufficient to sustain the orphans, particularly the younger one, and malnutrition begins to set in. The film opens with the death of Saita and closes with the death of Sechiko as the child succumbs to the horrors around her. In the closing moments of Grave of the Fireflies, we watch as Saita cremates his sister and leaves her, the cave, and his life behind. Grave of the Fireflies is nothing if not a tragic tale, but it is not tragedy alone that makes the film so impactful. There are no shortage of tragic scenes and heartbreaking moments, but these moments are giving so much more weight because they're offset with pure notions of innocence and beauty. The most personal instance of this juxtaposition can be seen in the attitude of the children and the adults that surround them. Throughout the film, it is clear that the motivation for everything that Saita does is out of care and love for his sister. This puts on full display one of the core themes of the film, the protective instinct of older siblings for their younger counterparts. Saita is but a child himself, but circumstances have forced adulthood upon him, and as such, his singular goal is to protect his younger sister by any means necessary. He will sell his late mother's belongings to provide for the girl. He will run towards a city being bombed to provide for the girl. He will be beaten black and blue to provide for the girl. Saita will do anything to provide for his sister. But in contrast, who will provide for him? He is, after all, a child himself. A child who crosses paths with no shortage of adults capable of protecting and providing for children who are in need, but for one reason or another, choose not to do so. There are several such adults, but the most prominent example of this callousness can be seen in the children's aunt. Initially, the woman is reasonably welcoming and hospitable. She is sympathetic when the mother dies and does allow the orphans to stay with her, ostensibly indefinitely. That being said, as the children continue to reside in her home, she becomes colder and colder towards them, to the point where Saita feels as if a cave is a more suitable domicile than her house. While there is something to be said for the war affecting everyone, including the aunt, it is hard to not view her as selfish to one degree or another. There are no instances of the children being anything but children. They're not overly loud, obnoxious, and so on, But nonetheless, the woman treats them as if they're scum. This selfishness is made all the more clear when looked at next to the selflessness that Saita displays for his sister. Another instance of juxtaposition on display is the innocence of Sechiko and the guilt of Saita. Sechiko is 4 years old, an age where one can be thought of as nothing but innocent, and that is clear throughout the movie. She's not quite ignorant of the horrors around her, but is not capable of fully grasping the gravity of her situation. At the start of the movie, Saita is also more or less innocent, but becomes less and less so as he goes to more and more depraved lengths, trying, and in the end failing, to preserve the innocence of his sister. This point leads into a crucial question that must be asked. Is Saita directly responsible for the death of his sister? It is, after all, largely his decisions that led to her demise. He is the one that decided to leave the aunt's house. Even though it was a less than hospitable environment, it was surely more secure than a cave. Though the aunt was cold and callous, surely she would not have been so to such a degree that she would have allowed the children to starve before her eyes. There is a scene where a farmer tells Saita to just apologize and move back in with his aunt. Is this even a possibility? The woman took them in the first time, but would she take them in a second if prompted to do so? The film never fully answers that question, leaving the audience to ponder such a thing. A final bit, and in my opinion the most powerful bit, of juxtaposition is in the setting itself. The movie takes place in war-torn Japan. As such, there are so many shots of the destruction that war can cause. We see scenes of cities being burned to the ground as fire rains from the sky. We see barren landscapes, pale parodies of the things that once were before the bombs began to fall. We see war. We see its aftermath. But we are also given an abundance of instances of beauty. We see pristine beaches with waves lapping upon the as of yet unmarred shores. We see verdant farmlands with plants still springing forth with life despite the death that pervades the rest of the film. We see the beauty surrounding the cave in which the orphans are living, despite the horrors that lie just below the surface. Grave of the Fireflies is perhaps the saddest movie that I've ever seen. A tale of woe, literally bookended by the deaths of 2 children. It is likely impossible to walk away from this movie feeling anything resembling positivity. That being said, the film is not without its moments of beauty, from the themes of care and indifference, to innocence and the losing of such a thing, to the horrors of war and the beauty of nature. Audiences are not solely exposed to tragedy, but also quite the opposite. It is the presence of both of these ends of the spectrum that makes the film so impactful. Grave of the Fireflies is a tragedy, through and through, but it is also more than that. By not solely reveling in the morose nature of the movie, it is elevated to something else. By showing us the beauty of what could be, it makes us think that much more about the horrors that are. By doing things in this manner, by giving us glimpses of light in what is almost overwhelming darkness, Grave of the Fireflies becomes not just a tragedy, but a beautiful tragedy.